Welcome back to another episode of the Nonprofit Show, everybody here. Everybody, we are thrilled you're here. We have a very interesting conversation today with Peter Heller, CEO and founder of Heller Fundraising Group. He's going to be talking to us about fundraising and nonprofit self-esteem. Peter, do you think that we have problems with our self-esteem across the sector?
Well, let me just start, Julia, by saying I have it myself. So how could it not be in the sector?
Oh man, there's no hope for us if that's the case. Well, I have never thought about this, but in prepping for your visit today, I've been trying to think about um, as a community fundraiser. I've never been a paid fundraiser, but I've raised a lot of money in my community and I've been fearless about doing it. Um, there's been a difference when I had better self-esteem about the organization that I was
Mhm.
speaking about. And I realize that now after, starting this deck with you. And so I can't wait to talk about this. Another thing I want to make sure that I don't miss out on is thanking our sponsors. And they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Nonprofit Thought Leaders, Staffing Boutique, Your Part-Time Controller, 180 Management Group, Fundraising Academy at National University, JMT Consulting, and Nonprofit Tech Talk. We have really been excited, Peter, to launch a new panel of co-hosts. They come from all over the nation. They bring a lot of diversity, different areas that they work in. And so hopefully all of our viewers and our listeners have been able to start to meet them. We've just rolled them out in the last month and a half, and it's really an exciting journey that we're on with these amazing, amazing thought leaders in our sector. Peter Heller, you're a thought leader as well, my friend. Talk to us about Heller Fundraising Group. And I got to start off with a question. Talk to me about this infinity logo with the dollar bills floating off of it. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
that was one of those weird things that just hit me when I started this company 20 years ago. Um, and this really relates to the self-esteem thing. I mean, we're in a world, you were just talking with me about weather and climate change, and we're in a world where there are a lot of really challenging things going on. And um, we believe it's really important to try to uh, address those from an abundance mindset, and that means, how can we create abundance in the nonprofits and the communities that those nonprofits serve, so that the world continues to become, a safer and better place, bit by bit. And so the logo is really about money shooting out of an infinity sign. It's infinite money. And if you want to kind of understand the origins of that, if you can go to our website and read a bit, there's a bit written there on that. It's a good
Yeah.
place to visit anyway.
Well, your website's really robust, and I really liked it. I liked learning about you and kind of getting a feel for what you all do and how you approach this. But I want to get right into this because I've never heard anybody actually articulate this or even point out the concept of nonprofit self-esteem. What is that? What does it look like to you?
Yeah. So let me start by backing up just 1 minute and say one or two things about the Heller Fundraising Group, because I think it gives some context for this. So, we're a small but quite powerful consulting company that helps nonprofits of all sorts with their fundraising strategies, and particularly campaigns and feasibility studies and major gift programs. And over the years, we've kind of spent a lot of time looking at what's going on underneath, why a particular organization can or can't raise the money it needs. And there's a lot of things. There's staffing, there's training, there's whether your story is right, and we'll get to that a bit later. Um, a whole lot of things. And like I said, kind of buried underneath there somewhere is self-esteem of your organization. Where do you think you are in the spectrum of things? Do you matter? Um, and well, I'm going to keep saying more about this. I'll just leave it there with that.
Peter, I'm thinking of COVID, and when we started to realize that this pandemic was going to alter the trajectory of our families, our businesses, our communities. I felt myself pull back and start to really favor or disfavor certain organizations. So I'll be very candid. I was like, money to cultural institutions needs to fall because we need to start moving, money towards our social services and human services. And I feel like that's somewhat of a self-esteem issue, how we judge things to be more appropriate or more valuable. And I'm wondering if that's part of this discussion, like how we see ourselves and how we see the viability or the importance of whatever the nonprofit mission
Yeah,
is.
so you've said so many important things right in that little statement there. So because I actually did want to address COVID as well,
Mhm,
and I think your initial reaction was very typical, and at the
mhm,
same time, not only was my company working with cultural and non-direct responder organizations at that time, but there's hundreds, if not thousands of them throughout the world that are doing important work.
yeah,
And uh, COVID and the pandemic is a great sort of case study of what self-esteem is all about. And it really helped me um, focus the conversation. And this is what I mean. Um, and I felt this before the pandemic, but I feel this even more strongly. And I'm going to kind of cut to the chase. If you, as a person working at a nonprofit, board member of a nonprofit, even funder of a nonprofit, but let's stick now with board members and staff. If you can't wake up in the morning and say, this nonprofit is crucial to the future of humanity,
yeah.
and I don't mean that in a little way, I mean that in a big way. Like
Mhm,
it might just be a social service organization that works on a corner of a neighborhood. You
mhm,
have to figure out why you matter and connect that to then doing your work, whether you're a fundraiser or whether you're, leading programs or entering data. I don't care what you're doing, but if you can't figure out why your work matters, you're probably not going to be happy in your job. You're not going to be doing a good job. And if you're leading the organization, you're either the wrong person for that or the organization should shut down. Okay, I'm
mhm,
going to be that clear. So COVID really focused that for me. I was very much a fan, just as I was in the Great Recession and when 9/11 happened. There's moments to pause some activities, but if you can't use those moments to figure out the importance of why you exist as an organization, you've got an organizational problem. And that's what the self-esteem is really about.
I think that's I love this conversation. And I think it's sometimes we sense this, but we don't give voice to it, or we don't have that nomenclature like self-esteem. So let's talk about this case study and the self-esteem syndrome. What does that look like? And can you elaborate like how we need to be thinking about this?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give two examples.
Mhm.
One from years and years ago, and then the other I was during the pandemic, and it's illustrative, if that's the right word. So years ago, our company, which happens to be based in New York City, though we work with organizations throughout the country and overseas as well. Um, we worked with a theater arts organization in Manhattan, in New York City, that was crucial to the off Broadway and the Broadway and off Broadway theater community. They did
Oh,
behind the scenes stuff like renting closet space, helping with budgets, all kinds of things that ecosystem could not live without.
right.
Yet when I would sit in a board meeting as my client, the board would go around, oh, we're not the theater, we're not Lincoln Center, we're not the like, how are we ever going to raise money? How are we going to do this or that? And I mean, first of all, I I said two things to them. because we were in the process of a campaign, a multi-million-dollar campaign to actually build some theaters, which is a whole nother story. But I said two things. One is, first of all, look at your database and your annual report. You actually do raise money, and you people around the table are giving money. So it's not true that nobody's going to support you because you actually already are. And the other thing is, cut it out. Just you
So.
need like don't that mindset is going to damage
Mhm.
your own conversations. It was kind of like a downward spiral.
Mhm.
So there's a lot. I mean, we could talk about that particular organization for a while, but more importantly, that's an example of low self-esteem for an organization. And same thing happens with like a organization that works with children, and they're like, we're not Save the Children. How are we ever, because they're huge, right? Doesn't matter. You're important. If you can't figure out why you're important, you know, get some help to figure that out, and because you are important.
Mhm.
The
So when
second
you,
case, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so let me back up. So when you said that to, I would imagine these sophisticated people within their sector and their, leaders within the sector, when you said that, were they like, wow, I never thought of it that way? Or could they buy in? Or how did that shake them up, if you will?
Yeah. So, people who know me know that I'm not shy about saying the things that are on my mind, and I try to do it in a nice way. But we think of consultants as having to be the dominant monkey sometimes. But you want to say it in like you want to wrap the client in a nice warm blanket, even though you're the dominant monkey. And um, different people are going to respond to that in different ways. You most of the time you can't just make a statement and then boom, behavior changes. You have to work with people along a period of time, and that's what it took to get there with those folks. We also did we had a few aha moments on how to explain their organization that helped with that as well. So may I get to the other example?
Yes, absolutely. Because
Yeah,
I think that's going to help us understand this even more.
yeah. So uh well, about a year into the pandemic, so like fall of 2021, I got back in touch with somebody who I had hired when I was an employee at a nonprofit, and they were one of my staff members, and they had moved on to a senior position at one of the Boston area hospitals.
Wow.
And she actually to this day is still the director of development for their psychiatry department. Okay. And now you can make an argument like, mental health was a very big issue during the pandemic, still is. But that's, they weren't dealing with first time, front responders or whatever there. So I'm talking to her and I'm like, hey, how's it going, Deborah? What's going on? And she's like, oh, I'm raising six-figure gifts all the time. And she was doing it through Zoom. Right now, that wasn't in the pandemic. We were advising people, so it's not the first time I heard it. But the aha moment for me there was the people at this hospital wake up in the morning. They're like, "We deserve money because we're doing important stuff. We're gonna just go and ask for it."
Yeah.
And that allowed us to further inspire a lot of our clients, just like
Mhm.
do it,
Yeah.
if you will. And I think that it's not it doesn't always turn on like a switch like that. You have to find what's motivating and what's aspirational, and like I was talking about our logo, what's going to help build abundance. Um, because let's face it, a lot of nonprofit work is very hard work. It's not fun and games all the time.
No, it's not, but I think it kind of speaks to your whole premise here that if you don't start out with positive self-esteem, you got a whole mountain to climb, right? Versus I love the woman in Boston who's like, yeah, baby, let me go. I've got it. I'm cranking.
Yeah.
And to her, it almost sounds like she didn't, I mean, she might have had some tough days, but like you said, she got up every day and said, I deserve this. Our group's doing the work of the angels, and by God, we're going to ask. So
Absolutely.
how do we create that positive self-esteem? I've got to believe that a lot of us don't even know that we're not in it, that we have a negative
Yeah.
mindset.
Well, I mean, I think like all of us suffer at least, a minute now and then, if not a lot of time,
Yeah.
with lower self-esteem. And I think before I say a little more of that about that, I just want to point out that you can be any size organization or nonprofit and have this issue depending on the mindset of the staff and how that translates into your messaging, how, what it's like to be at the office every day or to be on a Zoom call if you're doing remote work. And, and I've seen this at tiny nonprofits, and I've seen this at huge universities with billion-dollar endowments who are like, oh, we don't have as many billions as this other university, so we're not, how can we do that? Literally, literally. And it's like, get over yourselves already. So, um, the biggest tip that I would like to share about building positive self-esteem in terms organizationally comes down to the story of your organization.
Mm,
And here's the little tricky thing is that the story of your organization, if told really well, is really the story of a powerful, positive future for your community.
mm.
Okay. So I'm going to say that again,
Wow.
right? The story of your organization is the story of a powerful, positive future for your community.
Mhm.
Now, when we work with nonprofits, and particularly we're working on large fundraising campaigns, even though they know what they're doing really well, it usually takes an external player like us to help them figure out what that story is because people are so focused on I just got to get my job done, I gotta get my job done, all that, all that kind of stuff. And um, the big mistake that a lot of folks make is to tell the story of the future of their nonprofit. That's very different than the positive future of your community.
Okay, that's like a mind blow moment for me because I absolutely love that. I mean, that makes the concept of investment and collaboration moving forward a lot more easy to understand. And I think it also creates a longer term relationship discussion. And so, why do you think we don't do this? Like, why is this such a hard concept for us to understand?
Well, I don't know. I'm not like a genius. We're all self-centered and
Yeah.
so we're like, um, if I have to build a new building for my school, I'm going to talk about what that building is going to do for the school. And sometimes I forget the students. I mean, I've seen case for support documents. There's one I use when I do trainings as don't do this. And it literally like the document is like black and white cover and it's got a photo of the school. And then you turn the pages, you don't see, there's no pictures of kids. There's just pictures of buildings. It's like, hello, did you forget the kids? Can we have a couple kids?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think you said it a wise thing, and that is it really helps to get that outside voice when you're tackling these things because you're you made that comment. We're so in it. We're trying to do our jobs. We've got, you know, task mentality, and it's really hard to be a strategic thinker when you're trying to get through all the tasks that you just feel so behind on. And I can see what you're, kind of how you're thinking about this. I want to also, before we let you go, because we don't have that much time left, but I want to spend a little bit more of this discussion talking about mindset and leading to individual self-esteem. How do we corral that and even within our teams bring it up, right? And get them thinking this way.
Mhm. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, like what's the expression? Charity starts at home.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's the same thing with like self-esteem starts with each of us. And it's one of those things that first of all, you have to be aware of it.
yeah.
Um, and and I've spent a lifetime doing therapy, so like I'm like still working on it. And
Sure.
I think it's something that whether you're working in therapy or books and or talking with your friends or what, it's something to be conscious of about, oh, the reason I responded in that way was because I wasn't feeling too good about myself, or and then that really translates very strongly into how you show up, how you show up at your job. And again, it can be virtually show up or in person, it doesn't really matter. Um, and it's an ongoing process, but it's like being aware of it is one really important thing. And I think that there's a variety of practices that we can infuse into our workplaces that help on an individual level as well as a organizational level. So a few things, um, for instance, that we do at the Heller Fundraising Group. We have we have a small team, but we meet like every Monday by Zoom, and occasionally we meet in person. And we start every meeting with a everybody goes around and they celebrate. We use that word celebrate
Yes.
something that they did successfully in the prior week.
Mhm.
And then later in the week, we get together. So that's on Mondays, and on Thursdays, we get together just for a brief check in. And we're like, what went really well this week? Tell, one thing that you were working on that was successful, and one thing that you're working on that you're looking forward to, and it can also be a personal thing, doesn't have to be work, or it could be two things. And so that's a really small thing, but the reason for that uh is that it's just one practice that starts to reset the brain around positive stuff, because we're all spending so much time on the negative stuff.
Yes.
And I personally, like, I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, how is everything going to work today? And like, so it takes a while some people get up in the morning, they're like, today is amazing. And I'm like, okay, I want to be there. I'm not always there.
Yeah, it's so fascinating you would say that because I just spent 4 days on a leadership exchange on the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation is the largest tribal land and tribal nation in our country. And one of the things that they do is every single home, and it's whether it's a mud hogan or it's a trailer, their front door always faces east because they believe every morning is a reset. And when you see the sunrise, you are saying goodbye to yesterday, to the past, but it's a new dawn. And I was really so it's so interesting that you would just share this with me because that really resonated with me because especially in the nonprofit sector, we are so shackled by our programming and the tough things that we deal with, and then we have to fund it and we have to manage it, and it is just so arduous. So this mindset piece, man, I just don't think we're talking about this enough, right? And maybe until it's like too late, right? And I'm just so curious how we can start bringing this to the forefront. Um, because
Well,
I'm no, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. The same thing is true with a lot of things that you want to change in cultures. You have to put time aside, whether it's in, every week in our staff meeting, we're going to actually, like, self-esteem is not going to change by magic. We're actually like, let's have a conversation about it. Just like the culture of philanthropy
Yeah.
doesn't change in organizations just because you want it to. You have to have what does philanthropy actually mean? Why aren't we talking about it? What's going on? And I just want to there was a something that came to mind. Um, Years ago, I participated in a panel in Manhattan, not as a panelist, but I was there in the watching the panel, and one of the people on the panel was the head of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is one of the greatest art museums in the world.
On the
And
planet.
the panel was about post 9/11, um, you know, funding and work and every nonprofit environment. And what he said, and this, it was not days after, it was several years after 9/11. And he said, right after 9/11, people came to our museum to understand what was important and still mattered about humanity. And I don't think the Met has a lot of problems with self-esteem, but it's a great example of connecting how a cultural arts institution matters
Mhm.
in a time where everybody, maybe was thinking about and funding other things.
Right. A time of social duress,
Yeah.
to realign values and what is a sense of beauty and how does it play into, our better selves. That's really profound. That's really profound. That's my hope for the cultural institutions across our country who have suffered so tremendously during the pandemic because their funding got, lowered in terms
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
the totem pole, so to speak. And so, yeah, I appreciate that comment. And that's really a strong thing to even speak to a community that had suffered so much loss. In some ways, and this is maybe, how we'll finish up, it's very bold. It's very bold to have positive self-esteem and to wave that flag, right?
Yeah.
Because not
Yeah. Well,
everybody's gonna
I'll
support
tell
it.
you like a little behind the scenes thing is like we so I mentioned that celebrating thing we do,
Mhm.
and the first time I did it with my team was towards the beginning of the pandemic, where my wife is actually the brilliant one in the family, and she'd been studying some stuff, and she came up with this, or somebody had taught it to her, that the idea of actually bragging
Mhm.
about something that you're doing, and not in like, like I'm so great. I'm like, I mean, you can do that too, but that wasn't the point. It's more just like acknowledging something that you did really well. And the first time I introduced this to my team, nobody wanted to brag. They were very uncomfortable with it.
Wow.
And so it was a big lesson for me about like, oh, okay, huh, what's going on for people? What's that about? So I eventually changed it to celebrating, which
Sure. Made it more
and,
palatable.
and changed the team.
So let me ask you this, was it gender specific? Did the females have more problems celebrating or bragging than the males?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole, like,
That's
that's a whole nother cultural and
yeah.
gender thing
Yeah.
that's often true.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear my grandmother in the back of my head. Don't be so braggadocious.
Right. Right. And there's, there's moments that it's appropriate, and but just like self-esteem, it takes to getting those muscles
Yeah.
uh warmed up and in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have really, really loved this conversation. Peter Heller, CEO and founder of Heller Fundraising Group. You can learn more about Peter and his team at hellerfundraisinggroup.com. And you can learn more about their super cool logo that, for those of you maybe listening and not watching, is an infinity graphic with these magical dollar bills. I don't want to say dollar bills. I want to say $1,000 bills
Oh yeah. Yeah.
floating around. But really an interesting conversation today that, and you also said something that's a little heartbreaking, but I think true. This is not a one and done. We need to assume this is a practice and a mindset about building our self-esteem and how we value ourselves and our organizations. I will always remember your story about the hospital fundraiser in Boston, you
Yeah.
know, just saying, this is it, this is what I'm going to do, and really navigating that. I think it's really great. We just have a viewer that just wrote, excellent message, Peter. So good deal.
Oh,
I
well,
agree.
thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Glad we could share something interesting and useful.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Again, check out Peter Heller, hellerfundraisinggroup.com, and you can learn more about their journey and their approach to their practice as they serve the nonprofit sector across the nation. Again, we're here every day because we have these amazing presenting sponsors. And it's really interesting, they don't exert any editorial control. So we can talk about whoever we want. We can talk about their competitors. I mean, it's really a holistic approach that's allowed us now to do this for now. We're in our 5th year and we've done almost 1,100 episodes. And so our gratitude really needs to be celebrated, to use Peter's word, with our friends over at Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Staffing Boutique, Your Part-Time Controller, 180 Management Group, Fundraising Academy at National University, JMT Consulting, and Nonprofit Tech Talk. These are the folks that have really joined in to help our sector achieve the things that we want to achieve and to better ourselves. Peter, this has been great. I really, really love your approach, and I can't wait to even be thinking about it more as we journey forward. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's great to talk with you, Julia.
It's been a lot of fun. Hey, everybody, as we end every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we end with this mantra. And today it means something completely different to me. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here for another episode of the Nonprofit Show, everyone.